A whole 8 years would go by since the release of Batman and Robin, and in this time, we would have a resurgence in comic book movies. We would have the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy coming out, the X-Men series over with Fox, and all these comic book films were doing relatively well and making lots of money, granting Warner Brothers to be like, yo, we got our own spandex man in our lineup, let's bring him back to the big screen. But because of how badly they tarnished the Batman character, general audiences weren't really clamping for a new Batman film. Warner Brothers took a major risk here by hiring indie director Christopher Nolan, who had made two big theatrical releases, Memento and Insomnia, films I really enjoy, giving him full reign to do whatever he wants with this Batman movie as long as he can go ahead and reshape his image. And obviously history speaks for itself. Christopher Nolan would go on to create one of the most iconic Batman trilogies that fans today of Batman consider this to be the holy grail of Batman films, and I wish I could be on that camp of people who just endlessly love and praise these movies. I don't even got my pearls on, guys. Now, don't get me wrong. I completely agree with people who say these are the best Batman movies ever made, because that is true. I just went through the past 4 Batman films, and you saw me talk endlessly and passionately about those movies, but I'll admit, a lot of that is because of nostalgia. Those movies were my childhood. I watched those growing up 4 or 5 times a year up until I was like 12 years old. Because of that reason alone, I hold them fondly, and I like those movies, and is why I can talk about them for several minutes at a time. But I won't let my nostalgia goggles blind me in saying just because I don't love these movies as much as other people that they're not good films. These are so well put together movies when it comes down to performances, writing, strong and emotional character arcs. If I had to rank these movies, these Nolan films outbeat those previous ones every single time. But I'd be lying if I said over the years I didn't sit back and look at the movie community conversate about these films and just feel kind of left out. I never felt that enthusiastically about these movies or loved them as much as other people where they just talk about them endlessly with such high regard. I like this series, don't get me wrong, but that's just it. I just like them. I think they're okay. I rarely have an urge to want to rewatch these movies, but hopefully I can explain myself a little bit better as we go ahead and hit play with Christopher Nolan's first entry, Batman Begins of 2005. So with the opening of Batman Begins, we get the tradition of a Batman logo coming after the Warner Brothers logo, this time made completely of bats. From there, we're cut to a flashback scene of young Bruce and his childhood friend Rachel that are just running around Wayne Manor. Bruce, in running from his friend, accidentally falls into a well that leads to a cave filled with bats, cutting to an adult Bruce Wayne. And here's what I do like about Batman Begins is that it finally went ahead and really explored the origin story of Batman like no other movie did before. While you could argue maybe Batman 1989 was an origin story, it didn't really show you the death of the Waynes till like 2/3 into that movie. Here, the whole first third of the movie is really focusing on building up Bruce with flashbacks to him as a kid, interacting with his father, getting an idea of the character and moralities he would place on him. All of that is done really well, down to the damn pearls flying whenever the Waynes get shot. To me, the part of the origin I have trouble connecting to is the whole League of Shadows element. We see here adult Bruce Wayne that's imprisoned in a foreign country as he's exploring the world, unraveling his mind. Really glad that Christopher Nolan added that to this version of Batman.
And when I traveled, I learned fear before crime.
Where Liam Neeson comes in to invite him to the League of Shadows. And essentially, the League of Shadows is training to be a ninja. That's what they were going for with Batman Begins, is that this version of Batman was trained more as a ninja to not be seen or heard. Really cool concept. I just feel like Liam Neeson feels so out of place in this League of Shadows. Especially when the big twist of the movie is that he's actually Ra's al Ghul, the actual head of this organization. Funny enough, the League of Shadows in this movie could kind of be said to be the Court of Owls. In the film, they explain they've been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, manipulating things in different cities and trying to rid the world of crime by killing people.
The League of Shadows has been a check against human corruption for thousands of years. Every time a civilization reaches the pinnacle of its decadence, we return to restore the balance.
Heck, it's even implied that they're the ones who got the Waynes killed. That to me has just always felt like such a giant stretch. This random league of ninjas out in another country happened to be connected to Gotham and also connected to the death of Bruce's parents. Still, in the midst of all of this, there was something Christopher Nolan was attempting to tackle about Batman that had been lacking in the previous franchise, and that is his no-kill rule. But unfortunately, Christopher Nolan will not stick to this no-kill rule all throughout his franchise.
I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you.
Yes, that's what killing you means.
Because here he's asked to kill this person, and instead he says, no, I'm just gonna burn this place down and kill multiple other people instead. But once this is complete, Bruce finally understands what he needs to do with himself, heading back to Gotham, where we're introduced to a lot of important characters in his life that are super well casted. Michael Caine is Alfred, amazing. He does exactly what you would want from Alfred in showing care for Bruce.
Why do you give a damn, Alfred? It's not your family.
I give a damn, because a good man once made me responsible for what was most precious to him.
But also sprinkles in humor here and there.
Well, it's a good thing I left everything to you then.
Quite so, sir. And you can borrow the rolls if you like. Just bring it back with a full tank.
Something that Christopher Nolan exceeded in that all the previous Batman movies tend to fail on is the love interest. And in fact, I would barely call Rachel's character the love interest in the film because she really does come off like Bruce's best friend. To where when Bruce is kind of admitting his anger and guilt and almost killing the person who gunned down his parents over the trial where he was let go, she's the one that gives him the rude awakening that there are bigger problems in Gotham. There's much more stuff going on than what happened to your parents. The other character I want to talk about in this movie that is only appreciated in the first Batman Begins movie is the character of Gotham City. Christopher Nolan actually attempted to do something kind of creative here with this version of Gotham. Obviously, the Christopher Nolan version of Batman is to be super realistic. It's like if this guy actually existed, this is how he would go down and everything would play out. There's no sense of fantastical elements or fantasy or sci-fi thrown in here. Even the behind the scenes work on this film has said that all of Batman gadgets are based on actual military weapons. So I understand why Christopher Nolan would just use a regular city like Chicago to be Gotham City, but at least in Batman Begins, he had this whole section and slump of Gotham that just added some character and made it feel very different. Sadly, this will be the only movie we get this version of Gotham because every other film will just be a regular plain old city, really stripping away from the character of Gotham. But it is when Bruce Wayne lands in Gotham after he's gone through his origin and training with the League of Shadows that Batman Begins really picks up for me and is super enjoyable. Because speaking on Bruce Wayne, I love how he has to figure out a persona for himself, not only for Batman, but for Bruce Wayne. And that's where I want to talk a little bit more about Christian Bale as our version of Batman. I'm conflicted on the man because I think Christian Bale is a fantastic actor. The man absolutely has my respect, especially with what he went through to get this role. Many of you know he was in a movie previously where he weighed like 90 pounds and then in the span of a couple of months had to put on a ton of muscle just to play this character. That is dedication, plus it also helps that he's actually a really good actor, which is why I'm going to say Christian Bale, without a doubt, is the best Bruce Wayne we've had on screen. The way that he knows he needs to be this playboy character, pretending to be a rich, spoiled brat who's arrogant and talking down on everybody, is exactly what I always pictured the Bruce Wayne persona being. Because most Batman fans will tell you the real identity of Bruce Wayne is Batman.
Rachel, all this, it's not me.
And this film, I just don't get into his version of Batman. Like, his origin story in becoming Batman is absolutely fun. In fact, it's the reason I love origin story movies. Seeing how he'll go from a homemade suit to his first interaction with Gordon using a stapler as a gun, to meeting Lucius Fox played by Morgan Freeman and getting all these different devices to build his Batsuit. Like, that's just fun to see, especially since it's done in such a realistic way that you could kind of picture this actually happening. But once the suit is actually put on and Batman does his thing, I just don't feel Batman there.
I'm Batman. Nice coat.
The voice, for one, is definitely a cause of that. It is the most parodied thing about this trilogy is just that, "What have you done? Where is she?" What Christian Bale does with his voice in this movie is so harsh on his throat that it's said every time he films a Batman film, Christian Bale will lose his voice multiple times through shooting. The suit also surprisingly actually really reminds me of some of those previous suits in the early Batman movies, down to where this one could not do the neck turning thing either. But probably the ultimate downside to this version of Batman is the fight choreography that Christopher Nolan throws out there. The fight choreography in these Nolan films are just laughable to me. They are not well choreographed. They are flashy, quick edits. I don't feel the threat that this Batman has on villains. Maybe it's his stature or the way the suit is built where it just makes him feel a little smaller. And all of this combined ultimately is why I think I just don't feel as passionately about these Batman films, because Batman himself is the most lacking part about them. I'm way more interested when Christian Bale is Bruce Wayne and having those interactions outside of his costume. And that's kind of the downside we're facing a lot, where I'm scared with the Matt Reeves movies that they just want to keep Batman so grounded and realistic. I don't mind them doing that because it does enhance the movie in a way, making everything feel like it's possible. But by also doing that, you strip a lot away from Batman, because there are fantastical elements to him that just can't be realistic. Like Scarecrow in here, played by Cillian Murphy, absolutely amazing, so underutilized in this first Batman film. I still believe to this day he should have been the main villain and not a pawn to Ra's al Ghul's plan. It is interesting to see how Christopher Nolan and writer David S. Goyer can make him fit into a realistic setting with a guy who goes ahead and experiments on inmates, filling them up with fear toxin. I even think the combination of the Scarecrow mask and the suit looks pretty cool, but I guess it's just not interesting enough for Christopher Nolan to make him a main bad guy, because Christopher Nolan didn't even want to give him the Scarecrow mask. Apparently David S. Goyer had to convince him to include that. And there's a lot of other Batman elements in here that Christopher Nolan didn't want to include, like the Batmobile.
Well, would it be cool, would it fit into your version if he had a car?
And I remember very clearly sitting there and nodding and going, okay, I'll think about how to do that. But knowing that I couldn't conceive of any way at that stage to get the Batmobile into the film. I had been assuming we would not deal with that at all, that would be something that if somebody made sequels later on, because it seemed so fanciful, it's going to be disappointing without it. And I thought, okay.
It was said Christopher Nolan felt like there wasn't really a reason for Batman to have a Batmobile, but Warner Brothers insisted he include one, leading us to the Tumbler. And man, they find every excuse they can for this car to just cause as much property damage as possible. Any opportunity they have to crash into something, you bet they're gonna do it in this movie. Aside from its appearance, which I'm just not a big fan of, I always just felt it came off impractical and not that useful in situations where Batman needs to get around the city in a non-destructive manner. I know I'm just piling on negatives here, and it seems like I don't like these movies, but I do. I still like that this movie attempted to do a classic Batman story with a villain literally wanting to poison the water supply of Gotham City. That's as basic as a Batman villain subplot as you can get, poisoning the water supply. They even throw in some weird hokey device that I feel like is the closest thing to feeling like the old Batman films. It just again doesn't feel as memorable when Scarecrow is so underutilized with such little screen time, and this is the last few seconds that you get of him.
I'm here to help.
Those screams haunt my nightmares, Scarecrow. Look, Batman Begins is a really good movie, and I have all respect in the world for it and Christopher Nolan for bringing back Batman's spotlight and rebranding him into a serious manner. Heck, if it wasn't for Batman Begins, a lot of these other more serious, realistic takes on superheroes wouldn't exist. Heck, this movie will even set up one of the best Batman sequels ever made, but to me, at the end of the day, the reason I just don't hold it that fond is because this just feels like a crime spy thriller with Batman elements sprinkled in. And I totally mean it when I say that. You could essentially take the Bruce Wayne and Batman character out and replace him with James Bond, and this movie could come out exactly the same. You have the suave, handsome man who's on a mission, who gets his gadgets from another person, gets in his car, uses it to his advantage to go ahead and fight crime. Heck, Batman Begins is even credited for rebooting the James Bond franchise with Daniel Craig, because after they saw this film, they thought, we could do James Bond like that. And they would. So again, it's just my opinion and thought on this. I'm not attacking you if you're someone who loves this movie and thinks it's great. I would actually rather sit on that table with you and have such an enthusiastic feeling about this movie. But for some reason, my passion for this one can't be there all the way. The next one though, however, yeah, I'm probably at that table with you. But again, those are just my opinions with Batman Begins. Maybe some of you will agree with me. I know several of you are going to disagree with me, and that's fine. At the end of the day, I hope we can just respect each other's opinions and continue loving Batman. I'll catch you guys on the next one, but as always, my name is Chris. Take care.